They say that beneath every gilded mansion lies a secret best left hidden, and that behind every charming millionaire's smile there could lurk a silent storm. In the story you're about to witness, that storm crashes headlong into one woman's fragile world at the most vulnerable time in her life. Imagine a lavish penthouse suite, shimmering chandeliers, and the enticing aroma of a lovingly prepared dinner. Yet as the pregnant wife stands heart-pounding with hope, the plates she set so carefully are passed straight into the hands of another woman right before her disbelieving eyes. This is a tale of betrayal, survival, and the thirst for justice. Charlotte Dawson first met Andrew Dawson, though she knew him then as Andrew Moore, on an unseasonably warm day in London. She was a fresh-faced exchange student finalizing her master's in economics. He was an American tycoon's son who exuded confidence well beyond his 28 years. Their introduction happened at a symposium on emerging markets. Charlotte's professor, Dr. Rachel Underwood, had arranged a dinner for promising students to network with visiting entrepreneurs. Andrew was tall, with broad shoulders and a gleaming smile that claimed every room. He approached her with a rare intensity, looked her in the eye, and said, "I've never seen someone so engrossed in economic forecasts that they forget to sip their wine." She laughed a little nervously, but the sparkle between them was instant, like two magnets snapping together. In the months that followed, Andrew dazzled her. There were candlelit dinners by the Thames, chauffeur-driven rides through narrow city streets, and a sense of importance Charlotte had never experienced before. She came from a middle-class background. Her father, Gareth Hathaway, was a retired accountant in New York, living on a modest pension and carefully budgeting medical bills. Her mother, Meredith, had passed away years ago, leaving Charlotte with an unshakable longing for emotional security. Andrew seemed to fill every gap in her life. He was attentive, generous, and breathtakingly ambitious. He made references to his family's holdings and empire that allegedly included real estate development, tech startups, and even a small film production company. A sense of unreality followed him everywhere he went. Stories of private helicopters in Monaco, or once dining next to a famed investor named James Hathaway, no relation to Charlotte's family, but a name recognized in American finance circles, rolled off Andrew's tongue so casually that Charlotte felt she was stepping into a fairy tale. Yet a flicker of something else existed behind Andrew's polished charm and unspoken tension. He often deflected questions about his parents, changed the subject whenever Charlotte mentioned meeting them, or shrugged off the suggestion of traveling to see his roots. She assumed he was just private, or perhaps too self-made to rely on familial ties. When Charlotte's visa ended, Andrew proposed the idea of marriage. "We'll make a life in the States," he said, whisking her onto a yacht moored on the River Thames to present a glittering diamond ring. Overwhelmed, Charlotte said yes, convinced that she had stumbled upon her perfect, happily ever after. It was only after their wedding day, an opulent affair in a centuries-old estate just outside London, that Charlotte discovered Andrew's real last name was Dawson, not Moore. She felt betrayed, but Andrew explained it away as an attempt to keep the press at bay. He said he'd used an alias abroad to avoid the constant paparazzi that followed the Dawson name. "I want you to love me for who I am," he insisted, "not for my last name." Despite the uneasy feeling in her gut, Charlotte believed him. They traveled to Boston, where Andrew said he would establish their new home. It turned out to be a sprawling penthouse in Back Bay, complete with an entire staff. A housekeeper named Sonia, a driver named Aidan, and a cook named Marjorie, who greeted them timidly. Charlotte, overwhelmed, tried to adjust to a life of abrupt luxury. Over time, she noticed unusual phone calls. The phone would ring, Andrew would snatch it up, then vanish into the study. Sometimes he would fly to Houston for business without telling her until hours before departure. Bank statements and trust fund transactions were intentionally vague. Charlotte had a second pang of distrust when she discovered Andrew had withheld not only his last name but also his father's identity, Edwin Dawson, one of the wealthiest men in the entire East Coast. If he'd hidden so much already, what else was he hiding? Yet Charlotte carried on believing the foundation of love they had built was stronger than any secrets. She yearned to prove her worth, to show that she wasn't just some gold digger, but a woman who cherished and supported her husband. It was that desire to be the dutiful partner that would ultimately lead to the most humiliating moment of her life. Little did she know, in just a few months she would find herself cooking a lavish meal in that very penthouse belly swollen with Andrew's child as he committed the gravest betrayal imaginable, feeding that carefully prepared dinner straight to another woman, his mistress, right in front of her. News of Charlotte's pregnancy arrived after several months of quiet marital tension. A wave of joy crashed over her, momentarily drowning the uneasy truth that Andrew's secrets had begun to multiply. She had guessed she was pregnant even before the doctor confirmed it. She'd been feeling faint, fatigued, nauseous at odd times of the day. The test results glowed bright in her hands. A new life grew inside her. Maybe a new beginning for her marriage as well. At first, Andrew's reaction seemed surprisingly muted. He offered a tight-lipped smile and said, "That's wonderful, darling," before leaving for a business call. Charlotte tried to tell herself he was just overwhelmed. After all, fatherhood is a big step for any man, especially one with the burden of a powerful family name. Things seemed to improve over the next few weeks. Andrew rearranged some obligations to spend more evenings at home. He took Charlotte to meet a high-end obstetrician, Dr. Manuela Graves, and insisted on paying for the best prenatal care Boston could offer. He even accompanied her to an ultrasound appointment where the flicker of their child's heartbeat lit his eyes with what Charlotte believed was genuine wonder. If only that sense of unity had lasted. The cracks in Andrew's polished facade reappeared soon after. One afternoon, while rummaging through her husband's study in search of a pen, something Charlotte felt entitled to do, given it was also her home, she stumbled upon an envelope from a prestigious law firm, Thompson & Franklin. She wasn't typically one to snoop, but a single line visible through the half-open flap caught her eye, pertaining to the estate distribution of Mr. Edwin Dawson. Her heart hammered. A wave of curiosity and dread washed over her. She read enough to glean that Andrew's father was gravely ill and had initiated changes to his will, changes that involved Andrew's finances. She felt a pang of betrayal once more. Andrew had never breathed a word about Edwin's condition. Why keep his father's illness hidden? That evening she tried to confront him gently. "I found a letter in your study from your father's lawyers. Is he all right?" She expected Andrew to relent and explain. Instead, he erupted. "What are you doing going through my documents? Don't you trust me?" His eyes flashed cold. The conversation ended before it began. A more concerning development quickly followed. Charlotte began receiving phone calls from an unknown number. She picked up once only to hear a woman's voice say, "Do you know who your husband is meeting tonight?" The call ended abruptly. Chills raced across Charlotte's skin. She tried to brush it aside as some twisted prank, maybe a spiteful ex, or a random troublemaker who recognized the Dawson name. But the next day the call repeated with the same mocking question. She confronted Andrew about it, but he swore ignorance. "It's probably a jealous rival trying to unsettle me." "You must ignore it," he insisted. Despite wanting to trust him, Charlotte felt an undercurrent of fear. She was pregnant, emotionally vulnerable, and reliant on him for financial security. She'd stepped into his world as a starry-eyed lover, and now that world was peppered with shadows. When Andrew announced a sudden trip to Chicago, Charlotte's unease escalated. He claimed it was essential for a real estate venture. "Just rest and look after yourself," he told her, kissing her forehead. That night, as she lay in bed, haunted by the glow of the city skyline outside the penthouse windows, she felt more alone than ever. She imagined her mother's comforting presence, yearned for the anchor she once had. 2 days later, Andrew returned. The morning after his arrival, Charlotte found an unfamiliar perfume lingering on his suit jacket, something floral and provocative, certainly not hers. She confronted him. He simply said he had brushed against a perfumery display during a client meeting. The half-lies mounted, gnawing at her sanity. She kept picturing the woman behind the unknown phone calls. Was she somehow connected to that perfume? In the midst of this tension, Charlotte's father Gareth called from New York to say he needed help paying mounting medical bills. Charlotte told Andrew, who quickly wrote a check without complaint, urging her to mail it at once. "Whatever Gareth needs, we'll handle it," Andrew said, a dash of compassion returning to his eyes. For a moment, Charlotte found hope. Perhaps despite the secrets, Andrew was determined to be a good husband and father. Maybe love could conquer those anxieties if only she held on long enough. Still, her mind drifted to that envelope from Thompson and Franklin and the unknown woman's phone calls. She felt like she stood at the threshold of a labyrinth, each step revealing new corridors of dark possibility. If Andrew truly cared, why did he hide so much from her? And if the woman behind those calls spoke any truth at all, Charlotte feared there was something far more sinister at play. Boston society began whispering about the returning heir, Andrew Dawson. Society columns in local papers penned by the likes of Harriet Jones and others speculated about Andrew's business expansions and whispered about who his mystery wife might be. Charlotte's attendance at high-profile galas was minimal owing to her pregnancy and Andrew's frequent travel. Nevertheless, the rumor mill churned with stories of Andrew's legendary father, Edwin Dawson, rumored to be on his deathbed in a private estate near the Berkshires. Andrew refused to discuss it, but Charlotte gleaned from the gossip that Edwin was a demanding patriarch who had rarely acknowledged Andrew's successes. In the midst of these swirling rumors, Charlotte began noticing a new presence in her husband's orbit. Felicity Drake, a name frequently uttered in hushed conversations among Andrew's colleagues. Felicity was known as a cunning consultant from Houston specializing in revitalizing failing real estate projects. She was said to be dazzlingly beautiful and brilliant, with a reputation for mixing business with pleasure. One evening, Andrew invited Charlotte to a charity benefit dinner, an event supporting mental health awareness that the Dawson Foundation had sponsored. It was the first formal gala Charlotte attended since discovering she was pregnant. She wore a simple yet elegant silver gown that accentuated her growing baby bump. Despite her unease, she resolved to support her husband in public. The crowd of Boston's elite mingled in the grand ballroom of the Marriott, and Charlotte felt eyes on her from every corner. She tried to stay by Andrew's side, but he was whisked away time and time again by old acquaintances and business associates. As Charlotte stood slightly isolated, a woman approached, tall, blonde, with a chilling elegance. Her eyes seemed to assess Charlotte from head to toe, as though she were a competitor on a chessboard. "You must be Charlotte," the woman said, extending a hand. "I'm Felicity Drake. Andrew's told me so much about you." Andrew's name on Felicity's lips made Charlotte's stomach churn. She tried to respond politely. "Lovely to meet you." She forced a smile, but her pulse hammered. Why had Andrew mentioned her to this woman? And in what context? Throughout the evening, Felicity seemed magnetically pulled to Andrew's side. She laughed too loudly at his jokes, placed a hand on his shoulder a little too comfortably, and locked eyes with him in a way that radiated shared secrets. Andrew never introduced Felicity to Charlotte formally, which only heightened the sense that something was very wrong. After the gala, Andrew's mood soured. In the limo ride back to the penthouse, Charlotte tried to discuss her concerns, but he cut her off. "Felicity is just a business associate," he insisted, scowling. "She's stepping in on an upcoming real estate project to help me secure a contract. I need her expertise, not your suspicion." The nights that followed were eerily silent. Andrew spent more time locked in phone calls, leaving Charlotte to her own thoughts. She was acutely aware that with each passing week her pregnancy advanced, and she needed Andrew's support more than ever. The loneliness gnawed at her, as did the sense of mounting doom. Then came another phone call from that unknown number. This time the woman spoke more than a single cryptic sentence. He flew her from Texas to Boston for more than business. "Open your eyes, Charlotte." The line clicked dead before she could even respond. Suddenly, everything pointed toward Felicity. The unknown caller's warnings, the perfume Charlotte had found on Andrew's jacket, his defensive behavior. He seemed both drawn to Felicity and desperate to conceal their connection. Charlotte weighed the possibility that the calls were malicious gossip, yet her intuition told her otherwise. In a moment of steely resolve, Charlotte decided she would not be the naive wife standing idly by. She called her best friend from college, Vanessa Turner, who now worked as a paralegal in Boston. Though they hadn't been particularly close in recent years, Charlotte needed someone she trusted. Over coffee at a discreet cafe, she poured out her suspicions, tears glinting in her eyes. Vanessa listened carefully, then offered measured advice. If Andrew is crossing lines, you need proof. Not to blackmail him, but to protect yourself and your future child. Charlotte nodded. She felt a knot in her stomach. Proof of an affair might irreparably shatter her life, but living in ignorance would be worse, especially now that she was pregnant. She resolved to uncover the truth come what may. Charlotte spent the next week in a haze of worry and determination. Like a detective, she started paying attention to the small details around the penthouse. She noticed Felicity's name popping up on Andrew's phone, more frequently identified by a simple FD in the contact list. Each time Charlotte tried to bring up Felicity, Andrew would sidestep her questions. "Don't stress yourself," he'd say. "Think of the baby." Her nights were restless. She would shift in bed, her unborn child kicking gently, reminding her that she was responsible for more than just her own well-being. She had once believed her love for Andrew was a sturdy bridge that could weather any storm. But now she felt that bridge crack under the weight of suspicion. She took Vanessa's words to heart. She needed clarity. With the help of Vanessa's coworker, an IT specialist named Greg Mulroney, Charlotte attempted to retrieve Andrew's phone records. Greg was discreet, using legal public databases and scouring available business registries. What he found wasn't a smoking gun, but it indicated dozens of calls to Felicity's number at odd hours, often late into the night, and not just short calls. Some lasted 30 minutes, others nearly an hour. Business talk at 2 a.m. Doubtful. While grappling with these findings, another revelation hit closer to home. Andrew began bringing Felicity to the penthouse. It started under the guise of consultations about an upcoming property deal. One day, Charlotte walked into the living room to find Felicity perched on the leather sofa, laughing at something Andrew whispered. They stopped the moment Charlotte entered, a hush falling over the air like a guillotine. Felicity offered a polite but vaguely smug smile. "Apologies for dropping by unannounced," she said. "Andrew and I had urgent details to finalize about a new commercial site." Her eyes flickered toward Charlotte's pregnant belly, lingering for just a beat too long. The condescension was palpable, or maybe Charlotte was just overly sensitive, but the tension in the room was undeniable. Andrew coughed, then quickly ushered Felicity out, promising to call her later. The hush remained after she left a storm cloud in the penthouse. Charlotte turned to Andrew. "You need to tell me what's happening," she said, voice trembling. Andrew glared, an expression that combined anger and guilt. "You're making a spectacle of yourself. You're my wife. I need your support, not your paranoia." Fury burned in her chest. She wanted to scream at him to demand answers, but she was exhausted physically and emotionally. Her pregnancy was draining enough without this endless uncertainty. She retreated to the bedroom, tears threatening to spill, and locked the door. Andrew didn't bother to knock. That night, as she lay awake, she recalled her father's gentle words when she was a child. "Truth is never something you should fear, Charlotte. Lies are." She wanted to believe it still applied, even when the truth threatened to be devastating. She found the courage to phone Andrew's father's law firm directly. She knew the name from the letter Thompson and Franklin. She asked to speak to Mr. Thompson about Edwin Dawson's estate distribution, hoping to glean some insight. The receptionist, though initially reluctant, finally admitted that Mr. Thompson was traveling overseas for urgent matters related to a private client and could not be reached. Charlotte ended the call more anxious than before. If a major change in Edwin Dawson's will was in progress, Andrew's entire inheritance could be at stake. Could Andrew's involvement with Felicity be some twisted power move? Or was it simply a reflection of his real feelings, masked by the complexities of money and family obligations? Amid these swirling questions, Charlotte knew she was on the brink of a fateful moment. Soon the hidden secrets would either come to light or consume her entirely. And with her baby's future on the line, she vowed she would do whatever it took to protect them both, even if it meant confronting Andrew head-on. 2 days later, Andrew's father, Edwin Dawson, passed away. The news rippled through Boston's upper echelons. Every major newspaper carried the headline, "Business mogul Edwin Dawson dies. $2 billion estate in question." Charlotte found out via a breaking news alert on television, the anchor grimly recounting the older Dawson's legacy as a ruthless dealmaker who once took on the biggest banks and won. Andrew, ironically, was nowhere to be found. He had left the penthouse early that morning again without explanation. The phone calls began almost immediately. The Dawson name, now enshrouded in a swirling estate battle, had become a hot topic in the press. Andrew was presumably at Thompson and Franklin's offices, or perhaps at his father's estate in the Berkshires. Charlotte had no idea. He left her a terse message from an unknown number. "Don't go anywhere. I need to sort things out." Alone and worried, Charlotte decided to attend Edwin's funeral, if only to stand by Andrew's side. She assumed that was her place as his wife. Dressed in a black maternity gown, she traveled to the Berkshires by car, accompanied by the driver Aidan. Upon arriving at the grand gates of the Dawson estate, she was met with suspicious stares from uniformed security. They finally let her in after verifying she was Andrew's wife. The estate was a sprawling testament to old money, complete with manicured gardens, marble pillars, and a small chapel for private services. Mourners were already gathered, many of them high-profile businessmen and society figures. Charlotte scanned the crowd, heart pounding. She spotted Andrew standing near a row of caskets adorned with pristine white lilies. Felicity was at his side, pressing a comforting hand to his arm. Charlotte froze, her pulse roaring in her ears. Taking a deep breath, Charlotte walked up, ignoring Felicity's narrow-eyed glare. Andrew's face was pale and drawn, grief etched into every line. But there was also something else, guilt perhaps. Tension hung between them as Charlotte tentatively placed a hand on his shoulder. His body stiffened. "Why are you here?" he asked, voice low. Charlotte felt as though she'd been slapped. "I'm your wife," she whispered. "Where else would I be?" Before Andrew could respond, Felicity spoke up. "Andrew insisted he handle the funeral arrangements himself," she murmured sympathetically. "It's a stressful time for him. We've been working closely to make sure everything is in order." Charlotte could hardly process Felicity's words before Andrew turned away, focusing on the officiant who was preparing to speak. The funeral ceremony was coldly beautiful. The eulogies praised Edwin Dawson's tenacity, cunning, business acumen, and philanthropic gestures. When it was over, Andrew and Felicity slipped away to a back room, leaving Charlotte amid a crowd of mourners who whispered behind her back. She felt invisible and disrespected in equal measure. Eventually she worked up the courage to seek out Andrew among the estate's winding corridors. She found him in his late father's study, seated at a massive mahogany desk. Felicity stood behind him, arms folded, an air of proprietary closeness emanating from her. Beside them was an older man in a black suit, Mr. Thompson himself, presumably. Documents were spread across the desk. "You shouldn't be here," Andrew said icily, not meeting Charlotte's eyes. "I'm dealing with legal matters. Go home. This stress isn't good for the baby." Charlotte's voice shook. "I'm not leaving until you tell me what's happening. Why is she here, and why am I being shut out?" The tension in the room coiled like a viper. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. "Mrs. Dawson, your husband is sorting through the complexities of Mr. Dawson's estate. This includes significant responsibilities and obligations you may not be aware of." Charlotte glanced at the papers. She made out terms like irrevocable trust and marital distribution. Her heart pounded. "If it affects my husband, it affects me," she countered, determined to stand her ground. Andrew looked up, expression wavering between annoyance and something like remorse. "Father changed the terms of his will. My entire inheritance assets, shares, everything is contingent on fulfilling certain criteria." He paused as though weighing how much to say. Part of it involves certain family obligations. Felicity is here to help me navigate the business side. That's all. Charlotte wanted to believe him, but Felicity's presence suggested otherwise. How had she gained such intimate involvement? Why did Andrew seem more comfortable with her presence than with Charlotte's? Before she could voice these questions, Felicity spoke again, her tone coolly polite. "This is a sensitive process, Charlotte. Trust me. Andrew's position is precarious. Let him handle this. It's best you don't interfere." Rage boiled in Charlotte's veins, but she swallowed it, not wanting to explode in front of these people. She locked eyes with Andrew one final time. "I'm going home," she said quietly. "But not because you told me to. Because I see I'm not wanted here." She turned and left tears burning her eyes. Even as she walked away, Felicity's smug gaze bored into her back. The funeral, the will, the mistress. Everything was tightening around Charlotte like a noose. Her father's words rang in her ears again. Truth is not to be feared, but the lies are. And the lies in Andrew's world were stacking up perilously high. Days passed after Edwin Dawson's funeral, and Andrew remained at the Berkshires estate, allegedly sorting matters. Charlotte returned to the penthouse feeling abandoned and humiliated. She tried to find solace in setting up the nursery painting walls, a soothing pale yellow buying plush toys, and daydreaming about holding her baby for the first time. Yet every time she glanced at her phone, dread surfaced. Was Andrew ever going to come home, and what new secrets would he bring back with him? At last Andrew returned one evening without warning, letting himself in with a weary sigh. Charlotte, who had dozed off on the sofa, startled awake. She looked at him, scanning his face for answers. How did it go?" she ventured, carefully rising from her seat. He let out a heavy breath, eyes bloodshot. "It's complicated," he said, shrugging off his coat. "There's a lot of red tape with the estate. I'll fill you in later." Before Charlotte could press for details, he added, "I invited someone over for dinner tomorrow night, an associate who's crucial to finalizing the distribution process. I need you to cook something special. No staff." Charlotte blinked in surprise. "Marjorie can help." "No," Andrew cut in firmly. "I want it to be a personal gesture. Show my associate that my family is grounded, that I'm grounded. After everything that's happened, we need to project unity." Conflicting emotions warred inside Charlotte. On one hand, she resented Andrew for the secrets, for the humiliations at the funeral. On the other, a flicker of hope ignited. Perhaps this was his way of reaching out, letting her be part of his world. He was, after all, asking her to stand at his side, if only in a domestic role. She agreed more out of a desperate hope for reconciliation than genuine enthusiasm. "All right," she said softly, "but please don't shut me out anymore." Andrew gave a tight nod, then disappeared into his study, leaving Charlotte alone with her swirling thoughts. The next day, Charlotte poured her heart into the dinner preparations. She reached out to her mother's old recipes for comfort, an herb-crusted rack of lamb with roasted vegetables, a side of creamy scalloped potatoes, and a fresh garden salad. For dessert, she planned a chocolate soufflé, always a showstopper. She spent hours in the kitchen, ignoring the ache in her feet and the tension in her lower back. The baby stirred as if sensing her anxiety. When evening arrived, she set the table with the finest china silver cutlery and flickering candles. She wanted everything to be perfect. Standing in the dining room, pregnant belly accentuated by a simple yet elegant maternity dress, Charlotte felt a rare sense of pride. Despite all the heartbreak, she could still muster a moment of dignity and grace. Then the doorbell rang. Andrew went to greet the guest. Charlotte's heart hammered, suspecting it might be one of his father's lawyers or a business heavyweight. She stepped out to welcome them, only to find Felicity Drake standing there dressed in an extravagant designer gown that clung to her figure. The sight nearly made Charlotte's heart stop. Charlotte forced a polite smile, her mind screaming, "Why is she here?" She glanced at Andrew, who couldn't meet her eyes. Felicity's smile was more akin to a smirk. How lovely, she cooed, stepping inside. "I'm glad we're dining together as a family." Family! The word cut deeper than any blade. Andrew cleared his throat. Let's, sit down. Charlotte, is dinner ready? He didn't even attempt to apologize, explain, or offer a courtesy to acknowledge the tension in the room. Shoulders taut, Charlotte nodded. She led the way into the dining room where the table glowed under the chandelier. Felicity trailed behind, surveying the penthouse with a proprietary air. She settled into a seat across from Andrew, leaving Charlotte to choose a seat that felt like no man's land. Emotions churned in Charlotte's chest. She found herself placing dish after dish on the table, her pride in the meal overshadowed by searing humiliation. The succulent aroma of lamb, the warm smell of the buttered potatoes, these were meant to be a gesture of unity for her husband and his associate. Yet Felicity was no mere associate. That much was painfully clear. They ate mostly in silence, broken only by Felicity's patronizing compliments. "This lamb is divine," she said, batting her eyes at Andrew. "I had no idea Charlotte was such a culinary prodigy." Andrew nodded, barely touching his plate, tension written across his brow. Charlotte tried to force a few bites down, but her stomach churned with anxiety. As the meal concluded, Felicity laid down her fork and turned to Andrew. "Darling," she purred, "would you mind giving me a bit more of that wonderful lamb? It's simply to die for." Her eyes danced mockingly across the table toward Charlotte. Andrew didn't hesitate. He reached over to Charlotte's side of the table where the serving plate rested and scooped a generous portion onto Felicity's plate. In that moment, the final indignity struck. It was Charlotte's cooking, Charlotte's labor, and Andrew was offering it to another woman who looked upon Charlotte's dish as though it were her rightful feast. And then Felicity sealed it. She lifted her eyes to Charlotte, took a slow, savoring bite, and said, Perfection." Charlotte felt her throat tighten with unshed tears. The humiliation was so stark, so raw. She realized she was living her worst nightmare, the pregnant wife cooking for her millionaire husband, only to watch him feed it to his mistress in front of her, brazen, unapologetic. The baby kicked inside her as though protesting this travesty. The heavy quiet returned. Andrew pushed his plate away and stood. "We have some estate paperwork to discuss in the study," he said, motioning for Felicity to follow. Without another word, they left Charlotte alone at the table, her feast growing cold. Silence wrapped her like a suffocating blanket. She stared at the half-eaten plates, the flickering candles, the perfect meal meant to unite a husband and wife. Tears welled in her eyes, but anger seethed just beneath them. This was the moment that would change everything. She wouldn't remain the silent, dutiful wife any longer. The memory of Felicity's smirk and Andrew's complacent acceptance was too much. Little did she know this was only the beginning of a chain reaction that would threaten to tear apart everything in Andrew Dawson's world and just might free Charlotte from the gilded cage she'd unwittingly walked into. Charlotte sank into her seat, staring blankly at the remnants of her elaborate dinner. Every swirl of candlelight felt mocking, reminding her of how she'd slaved in the kitchen to create a meal for her husband's mistress. Numbness washed over her, swiftly replaced by a surging tide of fury. She was done playing the innocent, clueless wife. After clearing the dishes, she had no desire for Felicity to sneer at her housekeeping. Charlotte paced the penthouse, phone in hand, fighting back tears. Every fiber in her begged to run to slam the door on Andrew's so-called empire. But she was pregnant, and leaving required a plan. Financial security, emotional support, legal recourse. She had none of it sorted out. Yet she couldn't stay in this prison of deception and humiliation. She dialed Vanessa's number, praying her friend would pick up despite the late hour. After several rings, a groggy voice answered, "Hey Charlotte, it's almost midnight. What's going on?" Charlotte's words tumbled out a confession of heartbreak. She spared no detail about the dinner, about Felicity, about Andrew's cold indifference. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Pack a bag. Come stay with me tonight. We'll figure out next steps in the morning." The suggestion was like a lifeline. Charlotte rushed to the bedroom, quietly rummaging through her closet. Every minute she feared Andrew or Felicity might walk and question her, or worse. She shoved essentials into a duffel bag, including her prenatal vitamins and a folder of medical records. Her hands trembled with adrenaline. Just as she was about to step out of the bedroom, Andrew's voice echoed down the hall. I'm telling you, Felicity, we can't push the timeline. The board is already wary. His words drifted off, swallowed by the penthouse's vast corridors. Charlotte slipped out. She clutched the doorknob, her heart slamming in her chest. For a moment she wavered. If she walked away now, she might never return. Could she handle that? Could she raise this child alone? But memory of Felicity's smug face steeled her resolve. She left the penthouse, adrenaline fueling every step, until she reached the building lobby. She avoided the doorman's curious gaze, and once on the street she hailed a cab and gave Vanessa's address. When she arrived, Vanessa embraced her without a word, guiding her into a modest one-bedroom apartment. The cramped space felt like a safe haven compared to the cold marble halls she'd just escaped. Over a cup of peppermint tea, they discussed Charlotte's options until the early hours of the morning. Vanessa recommended she consult a divorce attorney, someone who specialized in high-profile cases involving prenuptial agreements. You need to safeguard your rights, Vanessa said firmly. Andrew's father's estate is in flux, but there's no way Andrew's not inheriting at least part of it. Your child deserves financial security if you leave. Charlotte's head spun with the reality of it all. Divorce, custody battles, prenuptial negotiations. She'd hoped to share a life of bliss with Andrew, not fight him in court while pregnant with his baby. Yet she saw no alternative. He had crossed a line of betrayal few marriages could survive. But even as she contemplated divorce, anger mixed with heartbreak. She wasn't just a scorned wife, she was a mother-to-be, determined to protect her unborn child. The next morning, she met with Vanessa's recommended attorney, Ms. Rosalind Carter, a sharp, middle-aged woman with years of experience. After listening intently, Ms. Carter asked, "Are you entirely certain you want to proceed with separation? In high-stakes cases like this, your husband might employ aggressive tactics, especially given his inheritance issues." Charlotte swallowed, recalling Andrew's fury when she so much as questioned him. "I can't remain in a marriage where I'm constantly disrespected and lied to, especially not with a child on the way," she replied, voice quavering but resolute. Miss Carter nodded, taking notes. "Understood. We can't finalize anything overnight, of course. The first step is to gather solid evidence, financial records, any proof of infidelity that might affect spousal support negotiations. The good news is Massachusetts law can be favorable if your husband's misconduct is proven. Andrew's father's passing complicates the inheritance, but we'll address that." As Charlotte left Ms. Carter's office, she felt both liberated and terrified. She had ignited a path that could end in a bitter courtroom showdown. That evening, a barrage of voicemails lit up her phone. Andrew's voice frantic, "Charlotte, where are you? Call me back." Another, "We need to talk." Then a text, "You're overreacting. Come home." She ignored them all. If Andrew truly cared, he would have shown it long before inviting his mistress to dinner. She braced for the possibility that Andrew would eventually come after her attempt to manipulate or threaten her. The weeks ahead would be a test of her courage and resilience. In the meantime, she found an unlikely ally in Vanessa's co-worker, Greg Mulroney. He knew how to do deeper searches for financial data, discreetly unearthing signs that Andrew and Felicity had been funneling money into a shell corporation. It became increasingly clear Felicity wasn't just a mistress. She was entangled with Andrew in business dealings that might border on fraud, or at least some questionable ethics. If the truth came out, it could destroy Andrew's standing with the estate board. Yet for Charlotte, the emotional wound still burned hotter than any financial scandal. She felt used and discarded, like an accessory Andrew acquired to meet a condition set by his father, perhaps the perfect wife who would legitimize his claim to a family fortune. Now that she was pregnant, the stakes were higher, and Andrew's betrayal stung more intensely. As she drifted off to sleep on Vanessa's couch, the baby fluttered within her belly. A part of her broke at the thought of a family splintered before it truly began. But she resolved to fight for her child's future. No matter how daunting the path ahead, she wouldn't let Andrew's betrayal define her or her baby's life. In the days that followed, Charlotte's situation escalated rapidly. Andrew tried to contact her repeatedly, alternating between apologetic voicemails and furious texts. One message read, "I'm sorry about what happened. It's not what you think. Please come home. We need to talk." Another arrived an hour later. "Stop being dramatic. You're carrying my child and we have obligations." That second message sent a chill through Charlotte. Obligations. The word felt like a financial term, not a declaration of love or fatherly devotion. It confirmed her worst fear that she was a pawn in Andrew's quest to secure or maintain his inheritance. Still, Ms. Carter advised caution. "If you want to negotiate a settlement, going completely silent might provoke him," she said. "Let's propose a meeting in a neutral setting with me present. No aggression, no screaming. Just an adult conversation." Charlotte was wary, but agreed. They scheduled the meeting for a Tuesday afternoon at Ms. Carter's downtown office. Charlotte arrived with Vanessa by her side for emotional support. She wore a simple black maternity dress that hid none of her pregnancy. She wanted Andrew to see the life they had created his child and realize the gravity of his actions. Andrew arrived with Felicity in tow, to Charlotte's disgust. She expected maybe a lawyer, but Felicity's presence was a blatant statement of confidence and power, as though she were Andrew's partner. Ms. Carter led everyone into a conference room where tension weighed down the air. Andrew sat across from Charlotte, leaning forward on the sleek oak table. For a moment, something like regret flickered in his eyes. "Char, this has gone too far," he said. "I made mistakes, but we can work this out." Felicity folded her arms, unmoved. "Andrew's estate matters are at a critical juncture, and this drama isn't helping. We're here to find a quick resolution." Charlotte's anger flared. She said nothing, letting Ms. Carter take the lead. "Mr. Dawson, my client is prepared to file for divorce. We are open to a fair settlement. Let's talk finances, custody, and if possible, an amicable arrangement." Andrew's jaw tightened. "Divorce. Is that really what you want?" He directed the question at Charlotte, voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation. "We're having a child, Charlotte. Do you want to tear apart our family before it begins?" Felicity snorted softly, her disdain palpable. Charlotte's eyes prickled. "You tore apart this family the day you fed my cooking to your mistress in my presence," she said quietly, the memory still raw. "I'm done being humiliated." Andrew pinched the bridge of his nose, exhaling shakily. "Look, I admit I've had an affair, but it's not as black and white as you think. Felicity and we have a mutual understanding involving our business partnership. It's complicated." He shot Felicity a warning glare as if to say, "Don't reveal too much." "And our marriage wasn't complicated," Charlotte demanded, voice rising. "You lied about your last name, your father, your finances, and your mistress. Which part was genuine?" "Andrew." He flinched, then took a calming breath. "I did love you. I still do. But my father's will changed everything. He insisted I appear stable and married before he'd release any inheritance. I felt pressured." He hesitated, glancing at Felicity. Felicity was a mistake that turned into a strategic alliance. She knows the real estate sector. She helped me maneuver around certain clauses in the will. I couldn't exactly walk away from that. Charlotte's heart twisted. So she had been part of a plan, a hasty marriage to meet some old man's demands, overshadowed by an ongoing affair to secure business deals. The rest was just empty words and illusions of romance. A fury deeper than she thought possible rose within her. Ms. Carter placed a steadying hand on Charlotte's arm. "We should discuss the practical terms. My client wishes to have full custody of the child with reasonable visitation rights for Mr. Dawson, provided he meets certain conditions. She also, full custody." Andrew interrupted, face flushing. "That's absurd. This is my child, too." Felicity smirked. "Come now, Andrew. Let's keep this civil." She turned to Ms. Carter. "We're willing to offer a substantial financial settlement provided Charlotte doesn't drag Andrew's name through the mud, and we can discuss shared custody once the child is born." Charlotte bristled, hating how Felicity spoke as if she had any say in raising Charlotte's baby. But Ms. Carter calmly stated, "We'll need to see the details of that settlement. Furthermore, my client has evidence of Mr. Dawson's misrepresentations and infidelity. Any attempts to deny spousal support or fair child support could escalate this into a more public and far more damaging legal battle. A flicker of fear crossed Andrew's face. He knew that a messy public scandal could jeopardize his newly acquired inheritance. "Let's not do this," he pleaded, looking Charlotte straight in the eye. "We can find a middle ground. You'll never want for anything, and I'll—" Charlotte's voice cracked. "Money doesn't solve the pain you've caused. It doesn't fix the betrayal." Tears pooled in her eyes. She wasn't sure if they were from sorrow, rage, or the hormones raging through her pregnant body. Maybe all three. The meeting ended in deadlock, with Ms. Carter promising to draft a formal proposal for custody and financial support. Andrew and Felicity left in a swirl of tension, Felicity casting one last triumphant look at Charlotte as though she'd won some twisted competition. Vanessa wrapped Charlotte in a hug. "You did so well," she whispered, kissing the top of Charlotte's head. But Charlotte felt far from victorious. She was stepping into a battlefield that might last months, even years. And all the while her baby's arrival loomed, an innocent life caught in a web of power plays and betrayal. Walking out of that office, Charlotte felt drained yet oddly resolute. Her illusions about Andrew were shattered, replaced by a clear vision of a manipulator who had used her innocence for a bigger scheme. If he truly loved her, he would have chosen her over Felicity and the intrigues swirling around the Dawson fortune. Instead, he had shown his loyalty lay elsewhere. As Charlotte waited for Ms. Carter to finalize the divorce papers, the stress of the situation weighed heavily on her. She woke every morning at Vanessa's cramped apartment, heart pounding with anxiety over what might happen next. One day, a tabloid ran a speculative article about the mysterious Dawson wife, suggesting Charlotte was after Andrew's fortune and had fled to pressure him for a bigger payout. Lies upon lies, all feeding the public's appetite for gossip. The emotional toll manifested physically. Her obstetrician, Dr. Manuela Graves, noted that Charlotte's blood pressure had climbed, cautioning her to reduce stress for the baby's sake. She advised rest, minimal conflict, and ideally a stable environment, none of which Charlotte's current life provided. But Charlotte persisted, determined not to return to the penthouse. In a surprising turn of events, Andrew arrived unannounced at Vanessa's apartment one afternoon. He knocked on the door incessantly until Charlotte, her heart in her throat, finally answered. He stood there, disheveled eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "I need to talk to you," he said, voice thick with emotion. "In private." Charlotte hesitated. This was the man she once loved so fiercely, the father of her unborn child. Part of her yearned for answers, maybe closure. She stepped outside, leaving Vanessa inside to watch nervously. Andrew exhaled as though the weight of 1,000 secrets bore down on him. "Everything is unraveling," he said. "The board, the trust, Felicity's deals, they're all in jeopardy. I never meant for it to come to this." Charlotte folded her arms protectively over her belly. "You brought Felicity to our dinner table as if I didn't exist," she said, voice sharp despite the tears threatening to spill. "It's hard to believe you didn't mean for this to happen." He looked away, shame flickering across his features. "I was desperate," he admitted. "My father's will demanded that I have a stable family life, or he'd cut me out completely. When we married, I thought that was it. We'd be a real couple. But then Felicity showed up with her business proposals. She promised me ways to secure more capital to surpass even my father's legacy. I got caught up in it. She was always around. She understood the ambition I had." Charlotte felt her anger flare. "So she became your mistress and I became a footnote in my own marriage. Do you realize how little sense that makes?" Andrew hung his head. "I know. I'm not making excuses. I'm just telling you I screwed up. I want to fix this. I want you back. I want to be a father to our child." He reached for her hand, but she recoiled. "Felicity is still by your side," Charlotte spat. "That tells me everything I need to know about your sincerity." Andrew paused, searching for words. "She's blackmailing me, Charlotte. She has documents that could ruin me financially. Proof of certain Questionable deals. If they come out, I lose the entire inheritance. The board would revoke my leadership. I'd be ruined, and so would any chance of providing you and the baby with a decent life. He swallowed hard. I'm trapped. Charlotte felt a glimmer of pity, but it was overshadowed by the magnitude of betrayal. You should have thought about that before you cheated and lied. You're only here because you're backed into a corner, not because you truly regret what you've done. A flicker of anger sparked in Andrew's eyes. I'm trying to make amends. I love you. We can still be a family. He gestured around the dingy hallway. You don't belong in this place. She squared her shoulders, refusing to let his words undermine her resolve. I belong where I'm respected. Right now, that place is anywhere but with you. Andrew pressed his lips together, nodding stiffly. Fine. If you want a divorce, you'll get one. But I won't let you take my child away from me. The threat hung in the air like a dagger. Charlotte's stomach turned, but she didn't flinch. We'll let the courts decide that, she said, stepping back. Now please leave. I've had enough of your empty promises. He left, shoulders slumped. Charlotte exhaled shakily, tears flooding her vision. She stumbled back into Vanessa's apartment, heart hammering with the realization that Andrew might fight her tooth and nail for custody, for control, for his pride. In the following days, Ms. Carter filed the divorce petition. Andrew's legal team responded with demands for shared custody. Public interest ballooned, with tabloids speculating on the pregnant runaway wife. A handful of journalists even staked out Vanessa's apartment building, snapping photos of Charlotte whenever she ventured outside. She felt exposed, a spectacle in a city that thrived on drama. Then, in a bizarre twist, Felicity Drake made her move. She confronted Charlotte alone, approaching her outside a grocery store of all places. Charlotte had stepped out to pick up prenatal vitamins, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Felicity, flanked by a black SUV, intercepted her on the sidewalk. Running errands for baby Felicity, asked with a saccharine smile. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against her designer handbag. How domestic. Charlotte's jaw clenched. What do you want? Just a friendly warning, Felicity purred. Andrew's father left strict conditions for the estate. If Andrew divorces you, or if it's proven he's unfaithful, the trust might not release certain funds he desperately needs for our business expansions. So you see, you've become an inconvenient obstacle. We can't finalize the deals until this messy situation is resolved. Rage flashed in Charlotte's eyes. I'm not an obstacle. I'm the mother of his child. And you're his mistress who helped break this family. Felicity shrugged, unruffled. Call me what you like. The question is, what's your price? She leaned closer, voice dropping. Walk away. Don't fight for custody, or at least compromise, so Andrew remains in control. In return, we'll give you a sizable payout and let you keep a portion of the Dawson name's influence. Enough to live comfortably. No drama, no courts. Everyone wins. Charlotte stared at her, shock twisting into disgust. You think you can just buy me off? I think money is the only language that matters in Andrew's world, Felicity said, her tone cold and businesslike. He'll always choose power, and I know how to harness that power better than you ever could. If you go to war, you'll lose. Andrew has the resources, the connections. A pregnant woman, especially with limited finances, can't stand against that. So consider my offer wisely. Charlotte felt her stomach churn. She pictured a future locked in bitter legal battles, her child used as a bargaining chip in the Dawson empire. Yet the idea of selling out her child's right to a stable, authentic family was abhorrent. She glared at Felicity. I'm not for sale, and neither is my baby. Felicity rolled her eyes, turning on her heel. Suit yourself. But don't say I didn't warn you. She slipped into the waiting SUV, which sped off, leaving Charlotte trembling on the sidewalk, groceries in hand. From that moment on, Charlotte knew the fight had transcended a mere marital split. This was about principle, about shielding her child from a toxic environment, about standing up for her dignity. Andrew was ensnared in Felicity's manipulations and the lure of wealth and power. The only path left for Charlotte was to break free, no matter what it cost her. And yet, as the final weeks of her pregnancy drew near, She couldn't shake the memories of Andrew's tender smile during their early courtship. The man she once loved was somewhere under that veneer of greed and ambition. But love alone couldn't resurrect a marriage built on lies. Now Charlotte's only mission was forging a future where she and her child wouldn't be pawns in a millionaire's twisted drama. Thank you for following Charlotte's tumultuous journey from the moment she first caught a glimpse of Andrew Dawson's dazzling world to the heartbreaking dinner where she watched him feed her carefully prepared meal to his mistress. Betrayal has a way of unveiling hidden truths, and Charlotte's story reminds us that no amount of money can protect someone from the consequences of deceit. Yet in the darkest moments we often discover our own inner strength, a power far greater than any bank account or inheritance. If you've been gripped by this tale of love, heartbreak, and resilience, I encourage you to show your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing to this channel. Share Charlotte's story with someone who needs a reminder that even in the face of adversity, hope and the will to survive can lead us toward a brighter tomorrow. Stay tuned for more inspiring and dramatic stories, and thank you for watching.